Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I would love to get your thoughts on them. You can call or text into the show, 719-247-1313. Also, keep that number handy if you are interested in either checking out the season opener for Air Force football. Season is here. Or if you're interested in seeing the Switchbacks take on the hottest team in the USL Championship right now in FC Tulsa. So a lot going on Saturday here in Colorado Springs. I got tickets for both events, and you'll need that number I just gave you handy if you would like to win them. But let's start with some thoughts on the Broncos preseason finale. You know, Sean Payton has talked numerous times about how important a fast start is this season for the Denver Broncos. And I would say that that doesn't just apply to the Broncos faring better in the first month of the season than they did last year. That's a big part of it, right? They started in an 0-2 hole and had to kind of climb out of it. And then you look at the schedule, not so much Tennessee and Indy, but right after that, things really pick up for this Broncos team. But I would also take that sentiment and apply it to the games themselves. And I think that's why there can be a healthy amount of concern surrounding the way that the Denver Broncos played in this preseason. Their starters on offense in particular. Because you look at it overall, Broncos won all 3 games, and there were some standouts. But really, what matters once the regular season rolls around are the best players on the Denver Broncos. And once again, Sean Payton had to leave his starters in longer than he planned to. Just so, like the 49ers game, they could end the game on a high note. They could come away with something good. They didn't the first 2 drives. They cashed in with the touchdown on the third. So 8 to 10 plays turned into 20 for Bo Nix in the starting offense. Here's Sean Payton when he was asked about that.
I said 8 to 10, and it's not.
Hang on. Now.
I said 8 to 10, and it's not etched in concrete. Right? You forgot that last part of it. So it wasn't etched in concrete. Yeah, you want to score, get out there. But I thought we did some good things.
But the plan was 8 to 10. Like, I get what he's saying. It's not etched in cement. But you were planning on them playing 8 to 10. Why did you go beyond the 8 to 10? Because they didn't do anything. And you had to put them out there for a third drive. Like, okay, fine. We forgot to add in that it was not etched in cement. Why was it not etched in cement? So if you didn't like what you saw, you reserve the right to put them back out there for another drive, which you did, which is well within your right. I would have done the same thing. But this is just like the 49ers game. He blew right past the anticipated snap count for these guys just so they could get a field goal on the board before he pulled them from the game. And in the last preseason tune-up before the regular season, you would like to see them do more than simply settle for a field goal. So you put them out for the third drive. They go down and score, and then they can come out of the game. Yeah, I know you said it wasn't etched in stone or etched in cement. But I feel like him bringing that up, he's trying to soften the blow of my offense, who I anticipated being out for 8 to 10 plays, a drive or two, could not get it done in a drive or two, so I brought him back out. The question still applies. We know what the plan was. Why did you leave yourself that wiggle room for a situation exactly like Saturday? And that was life with the Broncos offense last year, if you think back. Last year, the Broncos were in the bottom 5 of the league in terms of the amount of time it took them to score their first touchdown of a game. And just think anecdotally how slow the Broncos offense started in so many games last year. And what they did was they relied on the defense to keep the other team off the scoreboard, so they weren't out of it by the time the offense finally clicked enough to score a touchdown. And full credit to the Broncos defense, they did that to the point of the Broncos still scored the first touchdown of the game 8 times last year. And they were 6-2 in those games. And it all makes sense, doesn't it? You have an elite defense, one that led the league in sacks by a wide margin. You, on the other side, had a rookie quarterback. So the best formula to win would be try to get the lead and allow the defense to pin their ears back and get after the opposing quarterback. That was the plan for the 2024 Denver Broncos. But the key is you got to get that lead. You got to get a touchdown on the board. And the Broncos, many times, even though they did score the first touchdown of the game 8 times, it still took them a little while. Scarce were the opening drives in which the Denver Broncos went right down the field and scored a touchdown, which is all fine, right? Bo Nix was a rookie. He wasn't a quarterback that was going to win you games. The plan was for him to not lose you games. The entire Broncos team, and still to this day, is being built with an elite defense and a ball control offense, and an offense that is not going to put you in a terrible position. Play field position. That's what the Broncos did last year. You don't want to force a rookie quarterback to lead you back in all of these games. That's a recipe for disaster. And to the Broncos' credit, they faced a fourth quarter deficit 3 times last year that they had to overcome. 3 fourth quarter deficits were overcome last year by the Denver Broncos. That's it. One of them, or 2 of them, were 1-point deficits, and one was a 3-point deficit. And only in the Browns game did the eventual game-winning drive actually happen with less than 3 minutes left. So, and even then, Jaquan McMillan had the interception on the ensuing drive because Cleveland was only down by 2 in that game. So the point here is that Bo Nix last year was not, and the offense in general. When I say Bo Nix, I'm talking about the entire Broncos offense, with him being the most important piece of that. They just weren't built. They weren't talented enough to rally from 2 touchdowns down to win games. But because of the Broncos defense, they didn't have to. And it's why they ended up with the 10-win season. But my argument about this year's version of the Denver Broncos is I don't think they're that different, people are banking on this team being wildly different on the offensive side of the football than they were a year ago. And I've been saying they're not going to be. They still have to go into games with that thought process. Rely on our defense. Bo Nix, we know, isn't going to do anything that's going to be catastrophic because that's Bo Nix's identity, right? He's not going to take the sacks. How much have we talked about the sacks? He's not going to do that. Right? Bo Nix is going to put you in a terrible position, but he's also not going to rally you to win these games. And the thought is he's going to be able to this year, and I don't know that he is. So if the Broncos are going to win more games this year and do all the things that they're talking that they want to do this year, they're going to have to start games faster. And in the 2 preseason games where you saw the first team offense, they didn't start fast. Sean Payton had to extend their time in the game just so they could put points on the board. So what you've seen this preseason is merely an extension of last year, which is not going to win you the division, which isn't going to get you to compete for a Super Bowl. So if that's the bar, if that's what this team is expecting, you saw nothing during the preseason that would put you in a position where you believe that stuff is possible. It was very much the same Broncos team as you saw last year. So now the question becomes, when the games actually count, do we see this team turn it on a little bit more? And I think that the best thing for the Denver Broncos, given what I have seen this preseason, is that they start with the Titans and the Colts. The schedule makers did them a huge favor by putting those 2 games first. Because this team still, to me, looks like they need to work some things out. And they have teams that are in not a great spot at the quarterback position, not in a great spot offensively, and the Broncos defense should be able to carry this team to a 2-0 start. But by week 3, when things pick up and it's that first matchup with LA, this Broncos offense needs to get going faster and get a lead and do what they are built to do, which is to protect a lead. They're not built to rally in games. They're built to get a lead and protect it. They have a coach who's going to come up with a great script, right? And that's the thing. How Sean Payton can script out the first 10, 15 plays and the Broncos offense not be able to move the ball enough to put points on the board, it's a little concerning. But you know, when the season starts, Sean Payton will have a great game plan. He'll have a great script of plays. And you could trust that the Broncos defense isn't going to give up back-to-back touchdown drives. The Broncos will have every opportunity to lead in a majority of their games. And if they do, last season showed, they'll win far more than they lose. But I would argue 8 is not enough. Because the bar has been set above 10 wins. 10 wins isn't going to win you the division. Got to start faster than you've seen this team start in the last 2 preseason games. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts, not just on the New Orleans game, but the preseason in general. Have you seen what you needed to see to make your grand proclamation about how good or not so good the Denver Broncos will be? Take your thoughts on that. Elsewhere in the NFL, not a great weekend for the Sanders family. We'll get into that next here on Extra Sports 1300. The Air Force Falcons are back, and so is the Cadet Wing. Experience college football's most unique game day atmosphere Saturday against Bucknell. It is the season opener. Kickoff is at 1:30, and you can get your tickets at aftickets.com. I will be giving away tickets to that game coming up a little bit later on in this show. This Brian Robinson conversation that we had last week has gotten a little bit out of control here, if I'm being honest. I get one text from the 571 because some ESPN guy gave the Commanders a B for trading Robinson. Thought it was a good move. And then another text from the 719 reiterating, and I do remember you telling me that the Robinson trade would lead to Terry McLaurin signing. And yes, one happened after the other, but I don't think there is a correlation. I think these are two separate pieces of football business that the Commanders took part in, and one just happened to come after the other. But the best thing for the Commanders is McLaurin is signed. That's the big takeaway, and Terry McLaurin is more important to the success of the Washington Commanders than Brian Robinson is. We can agree on that. I have a difference of opinion, and it's not even I don't give the Commanders an F for trading Brian Robinson. I found the move curious, considering that he was their best running back last year and is not broken down. And I do think that he adds value and will help the San Francisco 49ers. I thought the move was a bit curious, but we're not even to cut down day yet. Because I did say I'd be curious to see if Adam Peters goes out and gets a veteran running back to bring into that room. It's curious that you would trade somebody who was your best running back last year. And I'll stand by that. While also looking out on the waiver wire to see if the Commanders do anything at the running back position, which I have a feeling they will. But the most important thing for the Washington Commanders is Terry McLaurin got his deal done. And now the most important weapon for Jaden Daniels is back. Everything is good. And we go through this every offseason. Somebody holds out, and then we get closer to the start of the NFL season, and then the less serious people about their Instagram scrubbing and trade demands and things like that, they back off, and a deal gets done. It's good news for the Commanders. Was not great this weekend for the Sanders family. Shador struggled. I think that's the most obvious way to put it. Struggled in his preseason finale. Meanwhile, Dylan Gabriel, you got to say this, Dylan Gabriel outplayed Shador Sanders in the preseason finale. But here's the thing. When you take in the discourse, and there's room for all kinds of discourse in the sports media landscape, but it's important to know what kind of discourse you're being involved in. Okay? Because are people talking about Shador Sanders from a talent evaluation standpoint? Or are they talking about him because they're rooting for him and treating him like he's one of their own? Because I have seen a ton of discourse for people who are either in Deion Sanders' inner circle or are Sanders apologists that are coming out of the woodwork, and it's Chad Ochocinco and it's Robert Griffin III. And I think RG3 was wearing a Shedeur jersey, which, again, that's fine, but I'm not going to take your commentary as seriously as someone who is truly evaluating how Shedeur is playing. Chad Ochocinco used the word sabotage, and it's not the first time we've heard that word thrown around with what the Browns are doing with Shedeur. And I don't think anybody using the word sabotage needs the Merriam-Webster definition, but just for the record, sabotage is an intentional act to destroy someone. It's deliberate. You're doing it on purpose. Are people really accusing Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns for intentionally ruining the career of Shedeur Sanders? That they hate him so much that they want to ruin him and will stop at nothing to do it? Because that's what sabotage means. Now, can you say that Shedeur was not in the best position to succeed? Yes. But here's the thing. You can't keep your first team offense on the field the entirety of the game. Right? Now, injuries have certainly affected the way the Browns have gone about this. But as far as Saturday's game, they wanted to get Joe Flacco work. Okay? They don't want to keep their first team offense in the entirety of the game. Somebody has to be last. Where are the people, by the way, crying for Sam Ehlinger? What a bad spot Sam Ehlinger has been put in the last couple of weeks by the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton must be sabotaging him because he doesn't get to play with Cortland Sutton. Like, this is nonsense. Somebody has to be the last guy into the game, and you can't have your best players out there for the entirety of the game. If Kevin Stefanski did that, and one of his key offensive players got hurt, real Browns fans, not Shedeur fans, because there's a difference, real Browns fans would be livid that one of their best players got hurt just so Shedeur could be treated, quote unquote, fairly. Like, what are we doing here? Could you view the fact that Dylan Gabriel was in before Shedeur as a peek into the mind of Kevin Stefanski on where he sees the pecking order? Maybe. But these people who are talking about Shedeur Sanders, like, they're not being objective. They're being fanboys. They have an agenda as much as they think Kevin Stefanski has an agenda. And what I saw from a talent evaluation standpoint is that Shedeur Sanders, while I think he'll be a starting quarterback in the National Football League, is not a transcendent talent. He is not going to be in the conversation with Mahomes or Burrow or Allen or Lamar. He's going to be in that the meaty part of the tier, the meaty tier, where Brock Purdy is the king of that tier and Bo Nix is in that tier, and it's a bunch of guys that you can get by with and they deserve to start, but they're not going to elevate everyone around them. That they are very reliant on their supporting cast. Shedeur Sanders playing with a bunch of Browns players who are probably going to get cut or we won't see at all this season, struggled. And he struggled, and here's the key. He struggled doing the same things that he did at Boulder that would drive you crazy if you're a Buffs fan. Shedeur is very good moving laterally. He can make a lot of plays moving laterally. But the one thing that is going to be the death of him in the National Football League is doing that thing where he turns around and runs straight backwards. That's how I play quarterback at Madden. It's not good. It's not sustainable. But when you're in college and you're the best athlete on the field, not named Travis Hunter, you can get away with some of that stuff. It's not a good habit, but you can get away with it. At the NFL level, you can't. So Shedeur Sanders, the rookie, hasn't quite worked that out of his game yet. And that issue was exacerbated by the fact that he just did not have the same time to throw as Joe Flacco and maybe even Dylan Gabriel to an extent. But this idea that Kevin Stefanski did it on purpose to ruin him, like he did it on purpose to evaluate him. And I actually don't even get why this is such a big deal, because the most apples to apples comparison of Dylan Gabriel to Shedeur Sanders are the first 2 preseason games in which they both started. And guess what? Shedeur was better. You don't think that talent evaluators grade on a little bit of a curve and take into account the personnel in which these guys are playing with? You don't think Kevin Stefanski goes into it like, yeah, maybe Shedeur might struggle a little bit, but we got to see it. We got to see how he reacts. Coaches do this across the league. They didn't even put him into that situation intentionally to see him struggle. It's just, I make the plan, and I got to make the plan for when I keep my starters in, and I can't keep them in just so Shedeur Sanders can play with the most ideal personnel around him. Because if you are someone that is crying foul because Shedeur wasn't allowed to play with the Browns' best players, then you are actually saying that you don't think Shedeur is that good. That the only way Shedeur is going to play well is when he has the best possible personnel around him. So you're not believing in Shedeur as much as you're saying you do. Yes, he wasn't as good as Dylan Gabriel on Saturday. He was better when he had the same personnel around him that Dylan Gabriel did in week 2. This doesn't change my mind on this Browns quarterback competition at all, and it shouldn't change anybody's. I mean, by comparison, Bo Nix didn't really move the ball with the Broncos' first-team offense. Do you think he might struggle a little bit if he was playing late in that game on Saturday with the 3s and 4s? It's okay. It's okay that Shedeur isn't always put in the absolute best situation for him to succeed. It's okay for him to face a little adversity. It's okay for him to take his lumps. Stop coddling him. Stop babying him. He doesn't want to be babied. I tell you, the first person that would push back against all this talk would be Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur doesn't want to be coddled. He wants to earn it. And yes, he looked visibly frustrated, as any quarterback would be. Browns aren't that good of a team to begin with, and now you're talking about their 3rd and 4th stringers? Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a rough day. But this idea, again, it came up again. It was week 1, and now it's week 3. They're sabotaging him. Nobody's sabotaging Shedeur Sanders. Let him earn this thing. Let him win this. I think he's still winning it. But there are these people that are just out to push this agenda, and it's bordering on delusional. And it's a clear agenda that they're trying to push. I like Shedeur Sanders. I believe in Shedeur Sanders. But do I think that the Browns are sabotaging him, intentionally destroying him? Absolutely not. There is a guy in this country that has like 30 names on the back of a jersey because the Browns can't figure out the quarterback situation. You don't think whether it's Gabriel or Flacco or Sanders or Pickett or Tim Couch or whoever it might be, you don't think that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry would really like to get it right? Now, they've made some missteps along the way. Certainly, I don't agree with the way they've handled everything, but more from the standpoint of why you draft multiple quarterbacks in the same draft. But as recent history would tell you, wasn't Washington glad in the end that they drafted both Kirk Cousins and RG3? I didn't get why Atlanta drafted Michael Penix, and now it's like, could you imagine if they didn't draft Michael Penix, what situation they would be in? So, yeah, it doesn't make it ultimately the right move. I still don't agree with the Browns drafting both of those guys. But in the end, it could actually work out. Nobody's sabotaging Shedeur Sanders. And nobody's sabotaging Shiloh Sanders. He's doing that all by himself. Shiloh, got ejected from Tampa's preseason game. He threw a punch. Not threw a punch. He connected a punch. He punched a Buffalo Bills player. Got ejected from the game, and today he got cut. Now, it was always going to be more tenuous whether Shiloh Sanders was on an NFL roster. Anybody that watched CU football knew that Shiloh, as an NFL player, was not a sure thing. But if you're someone in that kind of situation, you cannot do what Shiloh did. And look, that Bills player carried that block for way too long. And I'm sure he did on purpose. And I'm sure he said things to Shiloh Sanders that would infuriate anybody. Nepo baby may have been thrown around. I'm sure that Bills player was trying to goat Shiloh Sanders. You can't react. You just can't. Because you'll inevitably look worse, and you'll be the one that gets caught, and you'll be the one that's penalized. And in this case, he was ejected, and now he's cut. Now, he wasn't just cut for the punch. Can't do that. And I certainly don't want to be compared to my brothers. I don't think any person wants to be compared to their siblings. But I look back at what Shedeur said earlier last week or late last week with this non-story about Dylan Gabriel, entertainers versus competitors. Shedeur's like, even if it was about me, it doesn't bother me. Like, you know that people are going to say things to you because of who you are, because of who your father is. Your guys are going to use that against you. And the Sanders family, to be fair, puts the target on their back as much as anybody does. You can't react to that stuff. And Shiloh, who at times has maybe colored a little bit outside the lines when it comes to what is allowable in a football game, took another step too far in that preseason game. So not a great weekend for the Sanders family, but I think certainly Shedeur will be fine. He'll be fine. Shiloh, we'll see if he gets picked up for another team. Again, that's a little bit tougher to figure out. 719-24-7, 1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. Back by popular demand, our athlete of the week. And we're bringing our friends from Blackjack Pizza with us. Each week, go to extrasports1300.com to nominate a deserving high school athlete who balled out over the previous week. Then there will be finalists. You will vote on said finalists, and the winner will appear on this radio program to be celebrated. So right now, we're taking nominations. And we do this every week. So extrasports1300.com. Nominate a deserving prep athlete in our area. And we'll get that going. We'll get you some finalists next week, and it'll be a lot of fun. Appreciate the fine folks at Blackjack Pizza for sponsoring it and supporting high school athletes in Southern Colorado. So mentioned earlier, the Terry McLaurin deal got done. So that's good for the Commanders. And the Trey Hendrickson deal got done kind of by the Bengals. Ian Rappaport reporting that essentially what the Bengals are doing is giving Trey Hendrickson more money now and not more money in the future. In fact, no money in the future. They seem perfectly willing to let Trey Hendrickson leave via free agency after this year. Which, I mean, there's no way he's coming back to Cincinnati, right? No way he's in a Bengals uniform next year. After all of this, Trey Hendrickson's got to have more self-respect. He's got to go find another employer next year. Just giving him a raise for this season, and that's it. Interesting from the Bengals. But then again, the Bengals are a very interesting franchise. Is interesting the word I want to use? But Trey Hendrickson on the field this season. And the Bengals need him. I know without him or with him last year, they weren't great. Okay, but there's no chance that this Bengals defense is going to be any better than last year if Trey Hendrickson is not a part of it. Okay, there are 10 other guys on the Bengals defense that I would look at before I'd look at Trey Hendrickson as the reason why the Bengals defense struggled last year. But it's easy. It's easy to see why a lot of people, including myself, think that the Bengals will have a much better season than they did a year ago. Two keys for the Bengals. This simple. Start better. And your defense has to be better than absolute garbage. You do that with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, you're going to be a playoff team. Because they had the slow start and they had a garbage defense and they still nearly got into the postseason. So I think they are the easiest. Them and San Francisco are the two easiest teams to say, oh, they're going to be better. They're going to be better than they were a year ago. But that was contingent upon Trey Hendrickson being a part of this football team, which he will be. I don't think that the Bengals are better than Baltimore. I think even with understanding that their defense is, not going to be elite by any stretch of the imagination. I still think they're the second best team in that division. I think they are a playoff team. And if by chance this defense is much improved under Al Golden, dark horse to get out of the AFC. Because we've seen Burrow v. Mahomes. And that's gone better for the Bengals than Mahomes v. nearly everyone else in the NFL. So the Bengals are an easy team to back. The team is easy to back, but the franchise is tough. Right? But once they're out on the field, once it's about the games, Bengals are an easy team to like. And I think they get in. The Bengals and the 49ers are the two teams that I look at that they're definitely going to be better than they were a year ago. Not extending Trey Hendrickson is interesting. And you wonder, if you're, and I'm not trying to impugn the character of Trey Hendrickson one bit, because I don't know the guy well enough to know if he would or would not do this. But if you're in a lame duck year and you went through, like, it would be one thing if you're in a lame duck year, but like Nick Bonito, for instance. So I give Nick Bonito a ton of credit for being out there, for practicing, for playing in the preseason games, for playing at a high level in the preseason games, saying all the right things, doing all the right things, despite being in a lame duck year and be set for a significant pay raise. But I will say it's easier to do that when the contract negotiation is less contentious, right? When you actually feel like the team wants you. And when they're moving in an expedient manner towards getting you signed. We know the complications of the Nick Bonito deal. It seems like the Broncos are moving closer and closer. Right? They're trying to get this deal done. With Trey Hendrickson's deal, it's an easier deal to get done. Guy's not going from a rookie deal to a veteran deal. It's not the same as Nick Bonito in that regard, but yet the Bengals seem to fight him every step of the way. So you do have to wonder a little bit in a sport where guys are perpetually banged up, everyone's dealing with something. If you're Trey Hendrickson and you got hamstring, are you gonna what side of the fence are you going to land on as far as your status for that Sunday's game? This has been an acrimonious contract negotiation, and the Bengals are telling you, we'll give you more for this year, but we're not paying you into next year. Again, I don't want to say that that's what Trey Hendrickson will do, but it's reasonable to wonder. Because the Bengals are clearly telling him, yeah, we'll give you more money now because we have it. Like, sure, but we're not committing to you long term. What happens when Hendrickson is 50-50 to play in a football game? Not intentionally keeping himself out just to stick it to the Bengals, but like legitimately he has an injury where it could go either way as far as whether he should play on Sunday. Hendrickson is going to be faced with do I want to look out for myself? Because clearly the Bengals aren't supporting me. Or do I go out there and risk further injury when I'm set to hit the open market? So all of the Bengals' issues with Trey Hendrickson have not been solved with the $14 million raise. But at least this means he's going to be on the Bengals this year. They're not trading him. And as long as he's relatively healthy, he'll be out there and he'll be one of the better pass rushers in the NFL. And with that, the Bengals should be able to at least win enough games to get into the postseason. How legitimate of a threat they are in the AFC, I got to see it. I got to see how much better the defense can truly be. When they went to the Super Bowl, they were the 17th ranked defense. So the bar's not super high. So Trey Hendrickson getting a $14 million raise, no contract beyond this year in Cincinnati, while Terry McLaurin will be with the Commanders for not just this year, but years thereafter. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll get back to the Broncos preseason finale. Once you got past the first team offense, it was about the guys on the roster bubble, especially at the running back position. We'll talk about it next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in, hour 2 on this Monday. Glad to have you. Appreciate you watching the show on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. While you're there, you can drop a comment, follow, subscribe, do all of that stuff. I mean, you're already there. May as well, right? Get back into the Broncos here momentarily. I do want to bring this up based on a text from Roger, and it's a good point that he makes, or a good question that he poses. Trey Hendrickson, if you're just tuning in, has agreed to a $14 million raise this year. That's the middle ground, apparently, that he and the Bengals have come to, but he is not signed beyond this year. But it is the NFL. And Roger asked, can they franchise tag him? And the answer is yes. Of course they can. And that franchise tag is projected to be less than what Trey Hendrickson will ultimately make this year, which is he's going to make $30 million this year. The franchise tag is projected next year to be just under $27 million for someone in Trey Hendrickson's position. Now, you still wonder about, Trey Hendrickson and what happens next year if they franchise tag him. Like, is Hendrickson going to be okay with that? I understand he doesn't have the power to say no, but he held in for this. What is he going to do if he's set to become a free agent and they tag him? And also, here's something too. Could part of this be, hey, we're going to let you go and get your money elsewhere next year. So we'll give you a raise now, sign, get to practice, get ready for the season, and then we'll let you go. Could that have been part of this negotiation? Trey Hendrickson's like, I don't want to be here anymore. The Bengals are like, we're not committing to you. Could letting him leave via free agency have been a part of the discussion? Not to say that Mike Brown couldn't go back on that and tag him. But yes, when it comes to the NFL, there's always that possibility of a franchise tag, but this has been incredibly acrimonious. You already had Trey Hendrickson holding in because of this. And players just in general do not like the franchise tag. So what is that all going to look like next offseason if the Bengals are like, yeah, we're just tagging you? And he's going to have to play on a 1-year deal followed by another 1-year deal followed by... At the very least, it's not good for morale, which... the two organizations that I don't think care very much about morale, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Dallas Cowboys. Morale's very overrated, I think, with those two NFL franchises, given the way that they mess around with some of their best players. But the most important thing is that Trey Hendrickson will be playing for the Cincinnati Bengals this season. And can he help the Bengals be just, a little bit better than they were last year? And they're a playoff team. 719-247-1313. Broncos wrapping up the preseason on Saturday. And it was, of course, the last chance for many Broncos to make their case to be part of the 53-man roster. And that's where I got to give Audric Estime a lot of credit. Audric Estime on Saturday ran the ball like a guy who was facing his own career mortality. I think Audric Estime knows as well as you and I do that that is a crowded room, and he doesn't seem like a guy that's definitely going to be in that room. So if this was either, I mean, you look at it two ways. You go out there if you're Audric Estime and you say, I'm going to put together the best case I can to make this roster. And if I still don't, then at least I put some good film out there for other teams to be interested in my services. Sean Payton was, I wouldn't say effusive with his praise, but certainly did praise the running of Audric Estime on Saturday.
I thought we ran the ball better. I thought Audric did a good job in general, yeah.
8 carries, 45 yards. This was a guy that the first 2 preseason games could not muster barely more than 2 yards a carry. He had nearly 6 yards a carry. Playing with the same players that he did the first 2 games, by the way, because we did not see Audric Estime any earlier than we had seen him in the 2 previous preseason games. So you got to give Audric Estime a lot of credit for coming out and playing the way that he did. Ultimately, I think it's too late. And you know, the more I think about it, was Audric Estime, given how much that position for the Denver Broncos has kind of evolved in just a short amount of time over the offseason, don't you kind of look back at all of this and go, did Audric Estime ever really have a spot? Maybe as that last guy in, maybe. But after the Bills playoff game, it was like Audric Estime got to be the second-year player that's going to make the biggest jump, and he's going to be a big part of what the Denver Broncos do. And then they drafted R.J. Harvey, and then they signed J.K. Dobbins, and you're looking at it, and then they talk about the emphasis in the outside run game. And it's like, I think that plan's kind of changed. So I don't know if Estime, you know, was ever really in play for a real role within this Broncos offense. Because you already move him down the pecking order with Harvey and Dobbins. And what Jaleel McLaughlin brings to the table, I think, is a little bit more desirable than what Audric Estime does. And for some people, that's it. So Ryan Harris was again on the Broncos broadcast going, he'd only take 3 running backs. So if they're going to take a 4th, perhaps Estime could have found himself in there. But I look at Tyler Bidet, ran the ball fairly effectively, had the good return and the pass blocking. So I think it's probably too little too late from Audric Estime. But I think what he did against New Orleans is furthers the point I brought up late last week, which is another team's going to be interested in Audric Estime. Okay, this is a guy going into his second year. Somebody is going to, how about Washington? Just to tie everything we've been talking about together. What if the Commanders pick up Audric Estime after they traded Brian Robinson? But I would say once cut downs happen, I think Audric Estime will absolutely get a look from someone else. And don't forget about the practice squad too. Like, could the Broncos, maybe they don't have a role for him right now, but if they can pass him through waivers and get him onto the practice squad, which I think will be very difficult to do, but if they do it, then he's there. If an injury were to happen to any of the backs that they do ultimately take on the 53. But I think he was forced down the depth chart. Broncos had some other ideas about what they want to emphasize in their run game. And while Audric Estime did run the ball very well on Saturday, you have to say he didn't in the first 2 preseason games. It's kind of like that guy in a free agent walk year. Like, you got to be a little bit leery of a guy, you know, in that kind of a position, playing kind of above his normal talents, right? He knew that he was on the roster bubble. He knew he had to do something on Saturday. So when he does get a roster spot, whether it be with the Denver Broncos or someone else, is there going to be a slight regression to the mean to say, okay, let's say somewhere between the 2.2 yards a carry and the 5.6? I think that's reasonable to kind of think about with Audric Estime, who is not a big play threat in the run game. Never was. So he ran the ball well. And then the other part is, and this is kind of, it could be a fortunate thing for many NFL teams and players, but sometimes you get there through unfortunate means. Blake Watson, the other player that we've been talking about, gets hurt. And sometimes these roster cutdowns, they kind of make themselves. Now, I don't think Blake Watson was going to be the guy, but maybe the Broncos were somewhat worried about exposing him to waivers and how they were going to get him to the practice squad. Well, now he's hurt. So you see this across the league, that sometimes these cuts, these last 3 or 4 guys on and off the roster, they kind of end up settling themselves. Either through performance or health. But I'm still, I think it will be 4, and I think it will be Harvey, Dobbins, McLaughlin, and Bidet. And then we'll see if they can get Estime and Blake Watson through waivers to get them onto the practice squad. What else? Joaquin Davis got waived. That was my guy. Thought maybe he was going to be the latest undrafted free agent to make a Broncos roster, but the more and more it's looking like the Broncos are only going to keep 5 wide receivers. That trading Devon Vele does open up a roster spot, but maybe not necessarily for another wide receiver. And again, they could be trying to pass Davis through waivers early to get him onto the practice squad. That could be that. But a lot of the latest roster projections have the Broncos with only 5 wide receivers. Jeff Legwold, for instance, from ESPN, has them only keeping 5 wide receivers. And then with that, if you want to call it extra roster spot, the roster spot that would be taken by Devon Vele, he has them going 7 defensive linemen, which would keep them from having to decide whether to cut Uruzurike or Air Force's own Jordan Jackson. And you know me, I'll stump for an Air Force guy anytime. So I'll openly admit that I'll be on this side of Jordan Jackson and all of this. But I would also say that Like, he made plays. He's been making plays for Jordan Jackson didn't just get to the Denver Broncos. I mean, this guy has been on the active roster on Sundays. But he was much more noticeable this preseason than Uruzurike was. And at some point, you got to say, as much talent as you thought Uruzurike had coming out of college, at some point it's about performance. And Jordan Jackson, to me, has performed better. So if that, to me, talking about these last couple of roster spots for the Broncos, I could see the merit of only going with 5 wide receivers. But I would make the decision between Uruzurike and Jordan Jackson, and then I would use the quote-unquote extra roster spot, or the roster spot you opened up by trading Devon Vele. I'd keep both Q Robinson and DeAndre Tillman on the roster. Right? Outside linebacker is a position that Vance Joseph really likes to work that position group. To have reinforcements there at the ready for rotational purposes, for injury purposes. Q Robinson, a developmental guy, but he's a rookie, right? Like Uruzurike, how many years has he been in the league now? Like, at some point, you can't be labeled a developmental prospect anymore. Q Robinson still is. And DeAndre Tillman, again, to my point about production, has been productive. So if I'm keeping extra somewhere else, that's the position where I'm keeping. I decide between Jordan Jackson and Uruzurike, and then I keep an extra edge rusher on this 53-man roster. But a lot has kind of worked itself out with the Denver Broncos, hasn't it? The Devon Vele trade kind of opened up some things. But I don't know that the Broncos have a ton of really difficult decisions facing them. I think they got, I think 52 spots on this roster you feel pretty set on. And it's just that guy 53, that last one, what do you decide to do? Do you take an extra player at another position? Do you go with the 6 wide receivers after trading Devon Vele? But waiving Joaquin Davis sure makes it seem like the Broncos are going to use Vele's roster spot for something else. Roster cut down day tomorrow. We've seen a few of these. Garrett Nelson, linebacker, was put on waivers today by the Denver Broncos. So we'll get a slow trickle today, and then tomorrow it'll be, here's the 53. Take your thoughts on it. 719-247-1313. So, preseason in the books. How would you grade it for the Denver Broncos? That conversation next on Extra Sports 1300. This Saturday night, your Switchbacks face off against Western Conference leading FC Tulsa in a must-see match at Widener Field. It's Cyan night, so wear your Cyan gear and bring the energy as the Switchbacks fight for 3 points on home turf. Kickoff at 7 p.m. Seats are going fast. Get yours at switchbacksfc.com, or you can get them from me right now. Let's go a family 4-pack of tickets. This is a big match. I want you to bring your whole crew out to Widener Field on Saturday. So if you want to score 4 tickets for Saturday night's match, just text Switchbacks and your name to 719-247-1313, and the 13th texter will get a 4-pack of tickets to the match Saturday night. Apparently the Broncos' ears were burning because literally as I am talking about how Audric Estime is going to be on the way out of the Denver Broncos, Mike Kliss is tweeting out that the Broncos have waived Audric Estime. Like 10 minutes ago, like literally as I was saying that while Audric Estime, I thought ran the ball very well, I think he was going to be surplus to requirements. And you also wonder with Audric Estime, like I get that George Payton has shown a knack for finding guys later in the draft. And there's value to that. But at the same time, there's a pretty low hit rate even for the best when it comes to late round draft picks, right? Mid to late. And I almost wonder, would we even be talking about Audric Estime the way we did before the offseason had the Broncos had a reliable runner in Javonte Williams? Like the depth or just the number of running backs that Sean Payton used last year was a little bit out of necessity. I know he likes to have multiple running backs, but Javonte Williams, he just couldn't rely on him. And how many guys got opportunities? How many more carries did some of these guys get because Javonte Williams wasn't the runner that the Broncos were hoping he'd be? I mean, this is a 4th-round pick. So this isn't a bust. This isn't a miss by the Denver Broncos. In fact, if Audric Estime did turn out to be something with the Denver Broncos, it would be a more significant story than this one, where they're waiving him. So I just think back and I'm like, I don't know if there was ever a spot for Audric Estime. So he gets waived. And then with Blake Watson's, really the question just becomes, is Sean Payton going to keep 4 running back or 4 halfbacks? Right? That's the question now. I don't think it's a question of who those 4 would be, but do you ultimately keep 4? And I think you do, given that the lowest guy in the pecking order, Tyler Beatty, does bring that pass blocking aspect that Sean Payton so desires. So Audric Estime waived by the Denver Broncos. So how about this preseason in general? If you had to give it a letter grade, what would you give it? I think really other than Pat Bryant, I don't think any of the rookies really popped. I mean, Jahdae Barron made a couple of plays. on Saturday. I'm hardly worried about Jahdae Barron's long-term future with the Denver Broncos, but like Pat Bryant was the only rookie that was somewhat of a revelation. Everybody else was fine. RJ Harvey wasn't overly impressive running the football, still not really being used as a weapon in the passing game. And time will tell whether Sean Payton is doing that purposefully, or is it still that RJ Harvey hasn't earned his Joker wings yet. But I look at this Broncos preseason and I just say, what's the progress that was made? From last year to this preseason, or from the beginning of the preseason until the end of the preseason. I didn't see a ton of improvement from Bo Nix. He made a couple of plays. Cortland Sutton still remains one of the best red zone weapons in the National Football League. Saw Bo Nix use his legs a little bit, but I don't know what's the big takeaway from the Broncos preseason? I think Pat Bryant, from an individual standpoint, you're like, okay, Broncos might have something, to the point where they were willing to trade Devon Vele. That extra 4th round pick certainly help make the decision for them. But I do think that trading Devon Vele is a direct, you can connect the dots between that and what Pat Bryant did this preseason. But like the offense, still slow starting out. Sean Payton had to extend them out to make sure that they had some success. I saw this preseason not as, a sign of how the Broncos have improved. I saw it as an extension of what we had seen last season. And so if this team is going to improve, it's now going to happen during the regular season. Just don't know that there's a lot to go on there. And part of it too, there are not a lot of significant spots on the roster up for grabs, right? To where you allowed for even the guys that impressed late in these games, like Sam Ehlinger, for instance. Look at Sam Ehlinger and the way he played down the stretch of that football game on Saturday. Played great. Led them on that drive, had that kind of circus touchdown pass late. I thought Sam Ehlinger played very well. You're not going to be on the roster. Jared Stidham was terrific. He's not going to be the starter. The quarterback that matters the most was their least impressive quarterback of the preseason. I thought seeing Pat Bryant make some of the catches that he did show how sure-handed he was. And he's supposed to be coming out of Illinois, I think was probably the best thing, because it allowed them to make a move with Devon Vele and get some draft capital back. But that's the only real bit of progress that I've seen. Did this Broncos team run the ball way better than they did last year? No, but it's also not that surprising, because the guy that's supposed to improve the running game the most didn't hardly play. So I don't know, B-, C+ maybe from the Denver Broncos. I think Pat Bryant was the most significant development to come out of preseason. Probably Jared Stidham second, just further fortifying that, hey, if Bo Nix gets hurt for any stretch of time, you got a guy that can come in like Teddy Bridgewater did in New Orleans, and the Broncos could still navigate their schedule, not for an entire season, not for double-digit games, but a couple weeks, 3 weeks. They got more than capable insurance policy in Jared Stidham. But some of the issues that plagued the Denver Broncos last year plagued them during the preseason. It was the extension of last season rather than the first step to that next level that the Broncos feel like they're going to get to. And so that will have to be the first couple weeks of the season against lesser competition. Get some things right, figure some things out. Bo Nix and the starters are going to play the entirety of those games. Maybe that's where the real progress will happen. Take your thoughts on the Broncos preseason. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this.
From the 11 Alert team at KKTV, here's Southern Colorado's most accurate forecast.
We're celebrating the season of hard work with our Labor Day giveaway, and 5 winners will score $1,000 each to make their holiday unforgettable. You could book a weekend getaway, host the perfect backyard bash, or treat yourself to whatever it is that you've been waiting to splurge on. Head to extrasports1300.com to enter this national contest. Speaking of contests, but of a local variety, congrats to Nardo. Nardo getting 4 tickets to see the Switchbacks take on FC Tulsa Saturday night. It's a big one. Western Conference leaders coming into Widener Field, and the Switchbacks are now back in need of a win. No Matt Mahoney on Saturday, and the Switchbacks certainly missed him. Giving up 4 goals against Phoenix Rising, and now they've lost back-to-back matches, and it's, as I said on the broadcast on Saturday, it was 3 steps forward, but now it's 2 steps back. The Switchbacks need a result on Saturday to keep kind of ahead a little bit here. You don't want to go back to square one. You came out of that week off in July playing so well. You don't want to see all of that hard work and all that progress evaporate, but easier said than done against a team that hasn't lost in 3 months. FC Tulsa has been unbelievable this season. So Switchbacks, I think they need a win on Saturday. I do. See if they can get one with Nardo in the house. And for the record, Nardo, if the Switchbacks win, I will give you full credit on the broadcast. I will. So this past weekend was kind of meh when it comes to the college football, right? I don't know how much you watched. The problem was that the Broncos preseason game was at the same time as Iowa State, Kansas State. And my attention was more on the Broncos. But then when that game started to get late, I'm like, okay, I'll go back and watch the rest of it. And I watched Iowa State and Kansas State. That's a big game. That was a big game. I think you can certainly say that Iowa State now has put themselves in a good spot, picking up that win, because even though the Big 12 we know is a little topsy-turvy and should be again this year, not everyone is a contender. Right? Not everyone is. Maybe they have more contenders to win their conference than any other conference in America. But not everyone is contenders. Kansas State and Iowa State are both contenders. So anytime you have that situation, the team that wins, that's a big win for them. Kansas State will, I think, recover. And it's good practice going into this week, because we're going to get Texas and Ohio State. And the loser of that game is going to get buried. And they shouldn't. Unless one of them looks terrible. That's the thing. If you look absolutely abysmal, then that's a little bit different. But whoever loses Texas and Ohio State, they're fine. Let's not scare away these teams from scheduling strong in the non-conference by proclaiming the loser of that game dead. We did that with Ohio State last year. They lost a close game. It was a bad ending to it. Will Howard and that whole thing in Oregon. But people buried Ohio State. Let's not make that same mistake. Kansas State will be fine, but Iowa State, that's a big win. That's one of the legitimate Big 12 contenders that you were able to beat. As an underdog, by the way. Neutral site, I get that, but Kansas State, by many people's estimation, was the better team, and Iowa State came away with the win. Other thing, good for Hawaii getting that win against Stanford, and Fresno State on to week 2 or week 1, as it were, I suppose. That was one to forget. So things really pick up this week. And before we could get to CU, Georgia Tech, Air Force, Bucknell, got to figure out who the quarterbacks are. Well, nothing to report on that end. Pat Shurmur met with the media in Boulder, did not say who the starting quarterback of the Broncos, of the Buffs would be. Now, Deion speaks tomorrow. So maybe it's not Pat Shurmur's place to say, hey, it's going to be Caden Salter. But maybe Deion will do that tomorrow. Depth chart came out for Air Force, and no surprise at quarterback, it's Josh Johnson or Liam Zarka. And I've said this for the last few weeks. The Falcons are in a good spot where they really don't have to commit to one guy. Do they, are one of those guys really their starter? Like in a quiet moment, you give them true serum. Would they say one guy over another? Maybe. But because the schedule sets up the way it does, we were already going to see both. And we'll probably see more than 2 quarterbacks against Bucknell. You got the bye week. And then things get real with Utah State. And that's when you gotta have a guy. Maybe Air Force already does. And they're just doing the depth chart manipulation, smoke screens that coaches love to do so much. Or maybe they legitimately don't know yet. And they're waiting for a actual game, even one against Bucknell, to kind of solidify one guy or another as the starter. But you're going to see them both. And then Air Force will have an off week, and then they got to answer the question. Whether they tell us on a depth chart or not, they got to know. Maybe they know now, but they're not saying anything. But they got to know, even if they don't, they got to know by Utah State, in my opinion. So no starter in Boulder or here in Colorado Springs named yet. But both Troy Calhoun and Deion Sanders, the head coaches who would be the people to make those kind of proclamations and declarations, will speak tomorrow. And I would guess the quarterback position would be one of the questions brought up to both of those coaches. Speaking of, feel like it would be a good a time as any. Just gave away some Switchbacks tickets. How about some Air Force tickets? You want to see Zarka v. Johnson on Saturday? They're teammates. They're on the same team, but as far as the quarterback position, it's versus. Want to be there in person on Saturday for the season opener? 4 tickets for the 13th texter to text Falcons and their name to 719-247-1313. That's Falcons in your name to 247-1313. The 13th texter will get 4 tickets to see Air Force host Bucknell. And don't forget, the wing is back. The cadet wing will be there, and that will make the atmosphere all the better at Falcon Stadium this Saturday. And not that this is a reason for you to come to the game, but just as an FYI, I'll be at Falcon Alley with our friends from Frank Azar. Strong Arm I'll be out there at Falcon Alley with those folks. So if you are on your way into the game, come by, say hi. Excited for the season to finally get going here. What was the other thing? Oh, I want to get to Albert's text before we take a break because this is a fair thing to point out. Talking about Trey Hendrickson getting a raise for this year, but no guarantees beyond it. I would wonder how Trey Hendrickson, what side of the fence he would land on if he was truly health-wise 50-50 to play in a game. You got to wonder. This has been an acrimonious contract negotiation, and the Bengals ultimately said, yeah, we'll give you more now just to get you on the field, but we're not committed to you beyond this year. Should Trey Hendrickson be? Right? Should he, if the Bengals aren't going to look out for Trey Hendrickson's long term, should Trey Hendrickson? Albert says, how could any player on the Bengals be motivated to give the team everything? With all the petty teams, petty items the Brown family has done. Last team to get an indoor practice facility, not paying for the flights of Ring of Fame inductees and limiting them to only 2 free tickets to this Hendrickson deal. The list goes on and on. If you don't know what Albert is referring to, Boomer Esiason was on his radio show and was saying basically that he received an invitation and not much else. Like you get invited for their Ring of Fame, their Hall of Fame, whatever they call it in Cincinnati. You would think there are some things that are attached to that. Like, hey, bring the whole family. Just let us know. We'll fly you out first class, give you a great experience, and honor you the way you deserve to. And when I think of the Bengals historically, Boomer Esiason's one of the names that immediately comes to mind. He's as synonymous with the Bengals as any player. Collinsworth, Munoz, Esiason. Maybe you throw in an Ocho Cinco. It's not like this team has had a ton of success. So there are not a lot of guys that would come to mind. But Esiason's one of them. And for him to put you on blast by saying, I'm only getting a couple of tickets. Doesn't he have to like pay his own way? Or something ridiculous like that? Like, my goodness. I'm not saying every owner has to be Greg Penner, because not everybody has that Walmart money. Okay, like I get that. Not every owner has to put in new turf every time someone takes out a divot and get a big giant scoreboard and a giant new practice facility. I'm not saying that every owner has to do that. Credit to those who do, Greg Penner. Not everybody has to. But man, if you are honoring somebody, like, honor them. It'd be one thing if Boomer Esiason was just trying to get tickets to a Bengals game. And the Bengals are like, yeah, we love you, Boomer, but we really, we're not going to pay for your airfare. You got to kind of make it out on your own. We'll give you a couple of tickets. Like, even then, that sounds a little bit weird. He is being honored, supposedly. They're not doing a great job of honoring him. But it's just like, what did Sean Payton say? Sean Payton and I don't see eye to eye on everything. But him talking about, what did he say, 20 teams in the NFL that won't win because they're a mess at the top? Cincy. Now, they do have Joe Burrow. But you got to kind of question whether the Bengals, even with a talent like Joe Burrow, are ever going to figure it out to win a Super Bowl with all this other stuff. And if they do, we need to put some more weight on a Joe Burrow Super Bowl win, given everything that he has to deal with that clown show of an organization. 719-24-7-1313. We'll get into the three stories that are driving the show, including a big member of an Avs team from not long ago, but a former Av calls it a career. Tell you who after this on Extra Sports 1300.